Sure, my name is Gary Schyman, and my website is my name, coincidentally, Gary, GARRYSCHYMAN.com. Well, I've been a composer my whole working life. I studied music at USC and always wanted to be a composer initially for film and television, which I've scored a lot of film and television. And interestingly enough, in the 90s I scored a few games for Philips Interactive, including one which had, if not the first, probably one of the very first orchestral scores for a video game. Interesting bit, but I didn't. The industry was not really big enough in terms of looking for composers like myself who wrote orchestral music. Because of the technology, it hadn't advanced to that degree. But then in 2004, I had the opportunity to score Destroy All Humans. And when it was presented to me as an option, I was very excited. They wanted this 1950s sci-fi style orchestral score, a la The Day the Earth Stood Still. One of my favorite composers scored that, Bernard Herrmann. And so that was a joy to work on. It was really fun. And then the big break really for me was the lady who was the audio director on Destroy All Humans. Her name is Emily Ridgway. She went to Irrational Games, and they were making a game called BioShock, and she invited me to score it. So that was, of course, an exciting opportunity and a really artistic game, and the music was very well received. Won a DICE Awards for that. Well, certainly I grew up playing piano and loving classical music, so really the great composers, especially 20th century composers like Bartók and Stravinsky, Prokofiev, Shostakovich, those composers were very influential to me. But then, of course, the film composers like John Williams and Jerry Goldsmith, as I mentioned, Bernard Herrmann, and others were extremely influential. Well, I would have to say the BioShock series of projects rank up there, mostly because they just have been so creative. They're not afraid of experimenting, of trying really unusual styles of music. They don't want the traditional. As a matter of fact, Ken Levine, who's the head of the studio at Irrational, and Irrational is now closed, but if it sounded like a film score cue or a typical game cue, it was not. It was thrown out. He always wanted me to, break out and try and experiment. So, which was delightful, which is awesome to me. Just an opportunity to really do cool stuff and experiment and surprise people. Well, that's a very good question, Patrick. Originally, Elizabeth was a minor character in the game, and I remember the moment that they brought. It was E3 a couple years before the game came out, and they did a presentation at E3 in which Elizabeth was part of it, and everyone freaked out. All the reviewers, oh, this is such a cool concept, and all of a sudden they elevated her part in the game, and she became central. So when the game just took this 180-degree turn, which happens in video games, it would surprise people just how they evolve as you're working on them. One day it's one thing, and the next day it's, well, we've kind of changed the game. So when that happened, I realized that her and her relationship with Booker were really critical. I started thinking about what might be a good theme for her. They weren't asking me to write a theme for Elizabeth. I literally just said, I want to write something, and then I went in. I said, well, I want to record it. And they go, wow, why don't you just mock it up on synths? I go, no, because I think the performance with live instruments, with soloists, because all I had actually was a cello and a viola when I recorded that. I thought, you know, the live instruments will be really important to communicating this to Ken, my intentions, because I want this very dramatic, emotional performance. So I just, on my own dime, I went in. They later reimbursed me, but I went in and wrote it and recorded it, and Ken loved it. Immediately responded to it and said, "Oh, this really stimulates." So it was stimulating to him creatively, and he really appreciated it, and it became an important theme. Well, okay, two different opportunities. If you're a player, I think you want to get really good at your instrument. You're not going to likely want to just play video game. You're going to play any opportunity to record and perform would be, would be great. So just get really good, and if you have, if you're playing, if you're a cellist, but you can also do something unusual, like you play the electric cello, or you have some secondary skill or an unusual instrument that makes you unique. That's all. Composers for film, television, video games, we're always looking for something unusual, something that sounds unique. So if you can learn a traditional instrument and then take that instrument or something in that category of instruments, maybe there's an ancient version of it, and you become the expert at it, and put yourself on YouTube playing it. People will find it if it's really cool. So get good and then do something unique. As far as composers, it's a tough business. It's a really tough business, but there's always opportunities, I believe. I really do believe that for someone who's passionate. I would say, learn the art of composing music, become really good technologically, be able to take computers and synthesizers and samples and mock up your music and make it sound fantastic without live players, or maybe if you play an instrument, add one or two live players to your reel. So get educated, learn how to use the orchestra, study music, and write lots of music. There's an old joke that everybody wants to no one wants to write a novel, everyone wants to have just finished one. Well, you got to write a lot of music. No one's going to hire you because you want to be a composer. So write a lot of really awesome sounding music, and then maybe go to a city like LA. LA probably has the most composers because of the film, television, and video game opportunities. The agents are there, so it probably would be helpful to be in a city like LA. I have some composer friends who don't live in LA and do quite well, but still probably 95%. So probably it would be an advantage to living in a town where all the other composers are, and there's opportunities to work with them, assist them, etc.